Mellinger-Birdsong, and I'm a pediatrician that I work for mothers and others for clean air, talking about air pollution and health and climate. So we know, you know, so we know all about why we need to do it.
Ms. Roishetta, you could go next.
Hi, everybody. I want to apologize first for all the great music in the background. I'm sorry you all aren't here with me. I am currently in Birmingham, Alabama at the Gulf to Appalachia convening, and it is a great time. It is full of joy. And so I am Roishetta Ozane. I am the founder, director, and CEO of the Vessel Project of Louisiana. I'm also the co-director of the Fossil Finance Hub, and we fight against pollution of all sorts across the Gulf Coast, including LNG, petrochemical, and carbon capture and storage, and any other fossil fuel projects that might be coming. And with my organization, the Vessel Project, I am a mutual aid environmental justice organization, and we provide assistance to the community by way of bill pay, food assistance, emergency shelter, education, and empowerment. I'm so happy to be here with you all today.
I'm so happy to have you all here with us. Just a short overview of the agenda. First, we're going to start with a short presentation about LNG and understanding fall solution by Dr. Ann. Then Ms. Roishetta will be telling her story, getting us more in depth into the Vessel Project and why they do the work that they do. Then we will do a short Q&A discussion amongst the panelists, and also we'll do a Q&A with the audience as well, and then we'll close and have remarks. So Dr. Ann, you could go ahead and share your presentation, and we could go ahead and get started.
Okay, sorry about that. All right, so we're just gonna talk some about LNG, or liquefied natural gas, where it comes from and why it's so much in the South. So it's methane, which is a fossil fuel. The oil industry likes to call it natural gas to make it seem natural, but it's just petroleum. And then they cool it, super cool it way down to minus 260 degrees. So that's like, it takes a lot of energy to do that. And they actually use about 1/7 of the gas that comes through the pipeline is used to make the energy to cool it so much. And then they have to store it in extra thick tanks, because once it gets that cool, it becomes liquid. But if it was exposed to air, it would just go expand right away. And so they have to keep it in extra strong tanks so it won't uncool. And once it's in the tanks, they can put those on ships, and they're shipping it to Europe right now because they're trying to get Europe off of Russian natural gas. And it comes from, almost all US gas right now is produced from fracking or hydraulic fracturing. Fracking is a nickname, and almost everybody says that. And this is what a well pad looks like. There's all these machines and trucks and things. And they have this is the tube that drills it. And what they do, they inject water mixed with chemicals down and it's in shale, which is a pretty flimsy rock. And they inject this stuff, make the shale break up. And that releases the gas that's been trapped in the little pockets in the shale. And then they pull it back up through this tube and put it in pipelines and send it. So for the Gulf Coast, because it's so close, this is the Permian Basin where a lot of fracking is happening. And so it's just easy to ship it to Houston or Louisiana, or not a little bit Mississippi. Just convenient because it's right there. So, oops, I just went over that. It's also, this whole area has lots of petrochemical plants. There's lots of engineers and chemists that can deal with it. And there's also lots of ports from New Orleans to Galveston and in between. And also the state agencies here aren't so strict. Like I read a story about the Texas EPD, where one of the facilities put in their permit, and then as they started operating, they just said, oops, we didn't estimate right. We need to double our air pollution permit. And the state EPD said, yeah, sure, fine, no problem. Didn't even look into whether that would be harmful. So this is just an overview, the health problems that come. There's this article, the New England Journal of Medicine is a famous medical journal, and they had an article about natural gas. And this is a famous guy from New York University. And he said gas is associated with health and environmental hazards and reduced social welfare at every stage of its life cycle. So that includes fracking, where it's pulled out of the ground, the pipelines and compressor stations, where it is cooled and compressed. And then there's also climate change and air pollution. And every one of these areas also has equity and justice issues. So from fracking, there's always leaks when you pull it out of the ground. And then sometimes they get too much pressure pulled up in their storages and they have to vent and flare. So that creates more air pollution. They when they flare, they make particulate matter. There's lots of VOCs because of the leaking methane by itself, and it's always mixed with dangerous things like toluene and xylene and ethylene, and there's all these other petrochemicals that are carcinogens. Whenever you burn anything with the flaring or with the energy, you make nitrogen oxide because air is 78% nitrogen, and then the methane and the nitrogen turn into ozone. There's also lots of water contamination because when they inject this water liquid into the ground, it gets into the water table and spreads all around the gas well. It also pulls radioactive elements that are in the shale. They get loosened up and they get into the wastewater. So people that live nearby are drinking radioactive water. And then the fracking, there's lots of reports of earthquakes in Oklahoma and Texas and everywhere, all around the fracking sites. The air pollution affects people who have asthma, adults and children. It's linked with cancer, leukemia, and lymphoma. There's studies in Pennsylvania finding double or triple the risk of leukemia in children who were exposed to fracking while their mom was pregnant. So when they were in the uterus before they were born, they get leukemia when they're 2 to 4 years old. And adults get all kinds of cancer from it too, just from breathing the air and drinking the water. And then there's climate change. Methane is one of the strongest greenhouse gases around. It's 80 times stronger than CO2. It doesn't stay in the air as long as CO2. So long-term CO2 will last 100 or 200 years. And methane's only 20 years, but while it's there, it's really strong. And all the other VOCs also contribute to it. And then with equity and justice, the wells are located near indigenous or people of color, and drinking more of the contaminated water and breathing all that air pollution. And pipelines always leak. Everything to do with natural gas always leaks. It creates air pollution when it leaks. Anybody living near the pipeline, there's explosions. There's one town, I can't remember if it's West Virginia or Kentucky, that had a natural gas pipeline under the town and it exploded and blew up a house. And that happens in other places too. And then if it's underground or near a stream and it leaks, it contaminates the ground and the water. it also, all these leaks contribute to climate change. And again, with justice and equity, the pipelines are more likely to be put through Black and brown communities and not through white communities. So then once the pipeline gets it to the port, they have these big things that cool it off so it turns into liquid, and that takes lots and lots of energy. So they're burning all this methane, and again, it's leaking as it goes in and does this. And the burning makes lots of air pollution with particulates and nitrogen dioxide and ozone and all the VOCs that are carcinogenic that leak out with the methane. Then they also have to use more power to keep the tanks cool once it's compressed. There's always leaks. And then, the ships and ports and trucks, there's trucks going in and out, servicing bringing the tanks in and loading them. And the ships also make a lot of air pollution. And there's always, not always, but explosions happen often enough. You could probably say it's frequent, where the port, one of the tanks explodes or something like that. And again, climate equity and justice, they're located near the ports, and the compressors are located in Black and brown communities. And climate change is also affecting Black and brown people more. And then just health from climate change. We're already getting heat illness and heat stress in people in the South, especially outdoor workers. We've all seen terrible storms, hurricanes, and floods, especially Louisiana the last few years. The wildfires out west are not just affecting there, but even in Atlanta, where I live, we have slight higher air pollution right now because of wildfires from out west. It's affecting food and agriculture. When there's droughts, things don't grow well. It can cause a change in the spread of ticks and other mosquitoes and bring different kinds of diseases in. And then people tend to overlook, but PTSD and stress, the people who went through Katrina, it's almost 20 years ago, and it's still affecting their mental health all these years later because it was so bad and how they were treated and not helped. And again, climate change is equity and justice because it affects Black and brown communities are more likely to be located near coast and have, because of economic racism, don't have as many resources to become resilient. And then air pollution, I'm just lumping them all together. They each have a different effect, but it causes heart attacks, strokes, dementia, emphysema, and asthma, other lung conditions. It affects, that's later. It causes cancer, especially lung cancer, but also other cancers all over the body. Just like cigarettes, when you smoke a cigarette, you also get bladder cancer and things like that. In children, premature birth, low birth weight, it damages kids' lung development, so their lungs are 10% smaller when they get to be adults. It affects brain and cognitive development in children. And for both adults and kids, it affects mental health, and they need more services and more medicine. And again, it's equity and justice. There's lots of scientific studies showing that exposure is higher in Black communities. And so all of these, all the infrastructure and the air pollution making things are built in or near Black, Indigenous, and Latino communities. And usually the community was there first. Some companies decided to build a facility, and the state regulator said, sure, fine. There's more pollution exposure from them, and therefore more health problems. And then structural and economic racism means there's less resources to be resilient and deal with what's happening. And climate change has more, we're all in the same boat, but some of the boats are affected more. Black and brown people are affected more because of where people live and how they're exposed, kinds of jobs that are people are forced into having if they're outdoor workers. So that's the end.
Thank you so much, Dr. N, for that overview. Ms. Roishetta, can you tell us more about the Vessel Project and how you guys fight against false solutions in the Gulf South?
Yes, of course. Again, thank you all for being on here today. You could have chosen to do anything with your Tuesday morning or Tuesday afternoon, but you decided to be here to gain this knowledge and to hear my story. So I'm so appreciative of you being here. Again, I apologize for the background, but we are here having a good time in Birmingham, Alabama at the Gulf to Appalachia convening. Again, I'm Roishetta Ozane. I'm the founder, director, and CEO of the Vessel Project of Louisiana. The Vessel Project is a small mutual aid environmental justice organization that was founded. Actually, I was doing the work long before my organization had a title, but the title was born in 2020 after two massive hurricanes came through Southwest Louisiana, Hurricane Laura and Hurricane Delta. During those storms, myself and my 6 children, we became homeless, and we found ourselves living in my van, sleeping from hotel to hotel. And then finally, we were given a FEMA trailer, which is FEMA is the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and they allowed us a trailer, a 3-bedroom trailer for me and my 6 children to live in after this disaster. We stayed in that FEMA trailer for 2 years. And those FEMA trailers were another testament to how the government gives us scraps and crumbs. It wasn't big enough, and the trailers were placed right next to these fossil fuel polluting industries. So at this time, I was trying to help my community rebuild. I was paying for people to stay in hotels. I was providing emergency food, providing clothing and toiletry and all of these things for my community, all through crowdsourcing, through, fundraising and through mutual aid, just giving people direct cash assistance to meet their needs. While I was doing this, I was also very interested in how the pollution in our community was directly connected to the industry that was surrounding our community, and how that industry was perpetuating not only environmental racism, environmental harms, but how they were also causing these climate-induced disasters to come to our community so frequently and to be so massive. Now, when I first began talking about this, of course, people were like, the plants don't cause hurricanes, the plants don't cause tornadoes. God does that. It's nature. I heard all those things. But then as I studied more and I educated myself more, I learned how the greenhouse gases that were being released from these industries were causing our climate in Louisiana and in the South to warm. As I talked to more people, they would say things like, I never remember it being this hot as a child. I never remembered temperatures reaching 100 degrees. I never remembered wildfires in Louisiana. I've never seen this many hurricanes. I've never seen this many tornadoes. And so while people knew for a fact that these were things that were based on nature, they also knew that there was something not natural about what was happening in Louisiana. And so I began to educate people on how these things were connected. Because a lot of times we work in silos and we talk about injustices as separate occurrences, as separate events. We talk about the LGBTQ community. We talk about Black Lives Matter. We talk about environmental racism, but we talk about them separately when all the time they are the same thing. It is a system that was set up to continuously harm and kill the same people, low income, Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. When the NIMBY Act was passed and people were saying, not in my backyard, and white people had the money to move away from where these facilities were being located, more Black people were exposed to industrial harms from railroads, from the trains that were coming through carrying different types of chemicals from these chemical facilities, from waste facilities, from other gas and oil facilities. And now here in 2024, we're still fighting the same thing. I remember when people were fighting against coal, but now we're fighting against LNG. When coal first came online, people thought it was the best thing ever. When oil and gas came online, people thought it was the best thing ever. Now we have LNG and people thought it was the best thing ever. But now that scientists have come forward and said, no, this is horrible. It is worse than coal. Whenever you have to super cool this product or superheat it, pack it into pipes, pack it and ship it across the waterways to other countries, it is doing more harm for our planet than coal ever did. And I live in a community where 3 of these LNG projects are currently operating. That's not even talking about the cumulative impacts and pollution that's coming from the petrochemical facilities, of which I have 14 in my community. That's not even talking about the gas facilities. That's not talking about the pipelines, of which one of those pipelines just exploded a few months ago, and we had a CO2 leak in my community. Yet in states like Louisiana, you have the governors like Governor Landry who fight against federal mandates, such as this temporary pause on LNG that the Biden administration had enacted. Our governor just had that overturned in a Louisiana court to say that they want to continue to build these projects in communities like mine, a community that does not have access to public transportation, a community that does not have access to fresh produce, a community that does not have a hospital, a community that does not have banks, but yet you want to continue to put pollution there. We're losing our livelihoods as fishermen, as fisher folk. My son, who is 18 years old, can no longer fish and crab and sell his products because those things are being polluted. And my son has epilepsy, and he no longer can eat the fish that's coming from those estuaries because of the mercury that's in them. And those facilities have been fined by the EPA. So we're not only are we being poisoned, not only are we seeing this ugly, horrendous sight and not having access to green spaces, but also we're not even able to live off the land as we should be able to plant produce in our yards, to go fishing. So all of these are things that are happening, and no one can tell this story better than my own personal children. My daughter Camilla has told her story to Teen Vogue to talk about the skin condition that she has. My 6-year-old Cash has done commercials to talk about how our community smells. I mean, they're very involved because I'm raising the next generation of leaders. I'm not just doing this for me or just for my children, but because I'm fighting, because I'm involving my children and the youth, I know that this fight will continue. And so if I never live to see the fruits of my labor, if I never live to see environmental justice come to fruition, I know that there's another generation of people like Aaliyah, like Maresha, like my children, who will continue to fight. And that's why we're doing this. Today, we are here in Alabama. We are celebrating. We are with our kinfolk, some other Black folks. We are with folks from Appalachia. We are with some indigenous people, and we are bringing joy into this movement because this movement is heavy and it is hard. And every time we feel like we won a little bit, we get knocked back down. But we come together at events like this, and we come together and do these type of webinars to educate, to tell our stories so that people understand what we are fighting for. We're not just fighting against something, we're fighting to preserve our history, our culture, our way of life. Again, thank you all for being here. I know there is a question and answer session, but unfortunately, I can't stay on long because I have to go on stage in a few minutes and speak as well. I'm very easy to find. I am the only Roishetta in the world, Roishetta. If you don't believe me, I implore you to Google it and you will be surprised. They all have my contact information. The best way to contact me is through text, but I will eventually get to your email as well. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Ms. Roishetta. We appreciate all the work that the Vessel Project is doing. Dr. Ann, I want to ask you about the work that you're doing with Mothers for Others and how it affects LNG or how y'all advocate towards LNG.
Yeah, we talk about air pollution and we're working with actually Reverend Malcolm and you guys and PJC and Elders Climate to contact our elected people to pass laws that protect us and to get EPA in the last half year has passed a slew of strong regulations and that will affect particulate and other air pollution and regulating facilities and how much they can release. And we're also just talking to everybody about a lot of people, even doctors, don't even realize how bad air pollution is for our bodies. And so we're trying to spread the word. And it's like, even if you don't care about climate, the air pollution is so bad that it's worth having clean energy just to keep us healthy. So we're working on, we have a grant right now to do electric school buses so that kids that ride school buses aren't breathing dirty diesel, and that will reduce the amount of petroleum pumped and also be healthier for the kids that are in the school buses.
Okay, that's very much so important work. Air pollution is a major issue, especially along the Gulf South. My next question would be, what specific projects have you been involved in regarding LNG? Can you share any studies, examples, or research that highlights the effects of LNG exporting facilities?
I don't have I haven't done any research, but there's several studies that highlight where the facilities built and how dangerous they are to people. Most of them, they just say VOCs, volatile organic compounds, and that's all the other stuff besides methane that's in natural gas. And I would really I've been writing to EPA, not EPA, NIEHS, with one of the environmental health, one of the NIH facility. Anyway, they have an open comment period right now. And I said, been writing them saying we need to do more measurements around these sites that have, if they make enough pollution, they get on the toxic release inventory. And it would just be better to measure what kind of VOCs are coming and not just lump them all together, because they all have slightly different effects. They can cause headaches and they can cause cancer. They can affect all kinds of your nervous system. So, and there's just not enough. They just say VOCs and that's it. And it'd be nice to know which ones and how much. And the other thing that a lot of these facilities do, they'll have one and then they'll build another and they'll treat them as separate entities, even though they're on the same land and they're right next to each other. They treat them as separate facilities, so each one has its own permit. But if you look at the pollution coming from both of them, it would be a lot and they would count as a major source, but they keep each of them just under, like if the limit's 2,500 pounds, they'll make them each claim they each only release 2,400 pounds and they count as a minor source. So one of the things we can all do is pay attention to permits that are filed with the state and look at that and see shoot, like I know the ones in Texas, Freeport, but anyway, if they add another one and claim that this new one is a minor source, it's like, oh, but it's on the land that has two others already. So now there's three of them and the whole project is a major source, even though each one of them by themselves might be classified as minor. And the other thing is that I don't know why there's, we have to build all these facilities to make natural gas and ship it, and new ports and new terminals. And they have to do the same in Europe, and they have to retool their power plants because different gas has different things and they each have to be specific. And it's like, why aren't we just building solar and wind power in Europe instead of creating this? We're kind of out of time for a bridge fuel, and it would be cheaper and almost as fast to put in clean energy instead of perpetuating the dirty fossil fuels. But everybody just suddenly turns to like, oh, Europe doesn't have gas, so let's ship them American LNG. And we should just say, oh, Europe doesn't have gas, let's build them all solar panels.
Right.
But
Doc,
that's
Doc,
it.
Doc, let me jump in. I wanted to, I heard something you said about VOCs, and I want to make sure that we go back to it. You said you couldn't lump them all together. Let me ask you first, why wouldn't you want to lump them all together? What would be the purpose in separating them? How beneficial would it be for us to separate them and versus us actually lumping them all together to explain that this is all poisonous? So just help us to understand the warning that you gave, if you will.
Yeah, well, like benzene or xylene, they have different rates of how much they cause cancer. And so if you know if it's benzene or if you know it's xylene or toluene, they're slightly different. The risk factor is each. And if you just lump it as a VOC, it's hard to quantify. And most of the medical studies that are there say, you know, if you're exposed to benzene, they mostly look at workers where most of the exposure. But if you're exposed to benzene, you have X% risk of cancer. And if you're exposed to toluene, it's Y%. But if you just say VOCs, you're lumping the X and Y together, and you don't really know what's happening. So, and I just, I would like to, I think there's a lot more that we just aren't counting, and we need to document it better.
What happens, Doc, is when we lump all these VOCs together, they can get diluted to the extent that somebody might say, well, these VOCs label them as not being too harmful because they're all lumped together versus separating them out to say that, no, these are very harmful. These may not be as harmful, but also they are harmful as well. So I think not lumping them all together and understanding which VOCs are, what is it? What's the VOC breakdown? Organic compounds? What's the
volatile means? Volatile means if it's sitting at room temperature, it will evaporate into the air.
I want to say that again. Volatile organic compound. Right? Volatile. I need y'all to hear volatile, meaning it's bad and it's all bad. Some of it's worse than others. And so when we look at the volatile organic compounds, our advocacy can be helped by understanding which volatile organic compounds that we're actually advocating against and the health effects that come with it.
Yeah, that's true. Yes, because some of them don't cause cancer, and some of them affect nervous system differently. And you know, if you lump it all together, you're diluting the health harms. And it's good to know you have this much toluene and this much ethylene. You know, like ethylene glycol is different from ethylene oxide, but they're both VOCs. And there's this study just came out, there's like twice or three times as much ethylene oxide from some of these facilities like Formosa as what they claim they're releasing, but you go measure it and it's way up there. And so we need to just measure it. And it's hard, like the VOCs, you have to use a lot of chemistry to tell which one is where and how much of it. So it's not as easy as like particulates, you just get a filter and it's a lot easier. That's why purple air is so cheap. But with VOCs, you need chromatography and chemical stuff, but it needs to be done. Keep people healthy. If
Yeah.
if you can't prove what's there, then you can't convince regulators that something needs to be done.
And I often tell people, Doc, when I'm speaking in communities, such as Lake Charles, where um, Roishetta is living, where Roishetta lives, I often tell people that when it comes down to the impacts, they're compounded. It's not just one thing. Yes, that VOCs are a particular matter goes in the air, but that's also what goes in our lungs. It's also what
Right.
goes in our water. It's also what goes in our houses, and it's trapped in our houses. So 24/7 we're breathing those things. So
Yeah,
it's a
that's like,
compounded issue.
and if you have multiple facilities and they're all releasing stuff, then everybody's getting, 5, 10, 20 times the exposure from each place, but each one is just permitted individually, like it's the only one around, and that's crazy.
Speaking of in our houses, what can we do to perhaps measure these VOCs? What can we do to perhaps determine the health effect from this pollution that we're experiencing?
Yeah, we're working with a company that makes filters, and I'd be half as interested. The filter can take out VOCs because it's got activated carbon in it. Maybe we could get a grant and put some of those in people's houses, and instead of, I'm not enough of a chemist, but you would, if you want to measure what's there, you need to get with a big agency and a chemistry and get the gas chromatography done. But at the same time, we could do like what WEAC did. They changed out 10 stoves in 10 apartments and did a pilot project and found the level of NO2 was flat in the house compared to the ones that still had the gas stoves. It just went up to like 200 to 400. And if we could do a pilot project and put some of these filters in people's homes and see how much it reduces it and see their health improve. The kids have fewer asthma attack, and the adults with emphysema aren't going to the hospital as often. Things like that. It'd be really good. It's like we have so many studies showing what dangers there are, and we need to just like, let's deal with it. That's why it's like, I mean, I like studies, but we know a lot already, and we need to do more studies proving that putting filters in people's homes or getting rid of the pollution makes them healthier. That's the kind of study I like.
Right.
Well, speaking of studies, I would like for you as a scientist to speak on citizen science studies. One of the ways that we can measure health impact is by really just talking to one another and
Right.
asking the health history questions. Can you speak more about citizen science studies and health assessment?
Yeah, I think that's really important because people can put the measuring devices in their yard or in their living room or whatever and measure how much is there. With the chromatography, it's a little different. And I'm not as familiar with if they have to have the machine, if you can just collect, like some things you can collect on a filter blotter and then analyze it later. And I'm not sure with the VOCs if you have to do that. And it might be a big machine in your living room, but I think getting it done in people's houses and not just one site that may be upwind of the facility, but doing lots of people and citizens can. EPA has grants for air pollution monitoring right now, which is mostly PM, but if you're getting PM, there's going to be VOCs there too. And so that's why all the PM rules are good, because it means we're burning less, and whatever is we're burning to make the PM is leaking and making VOCs. And if you reduce PM, you reduce all the fossil fuels. So it's a good rule. And anyway, but citizen science, there's a lot of projects, just getting purple air monitors and measuring if they're all the same. They're not quite as accurate, but if you have like 50 of them showing a problem, you can say, yeah, that's a problem. You know, if you had one showing a problem, you'd say, well, maybe, maybe not. But if all 50 of them are all showing they're the problem, it's definitely there. So,
Well, also, when we talk about health impacts, one of the things that we understand, we know what we go through. We may not be able to necessarily articulate that in medical terms or even science terms,
yeah,
or the language of nonprofit, if you will, but we know what we are experiencing.
yeah,
And when we have conversation with one another and ask one another, how long have you had that headache? Was that headache happening before this plant got here? And eventually, as you said, it may be 2 or 3 that may say no or yes. But if you've got 50 of them in that community saying yes or no, then you know that may be an issue right there.
that's
That's
true.
considered science, and
Yep.
that's provable. Now you've got something that we can look into, or that the governmental institutions or medical institutions, but others can actually look in
Yeah,
and measure what's happening because you've actually articulated how it is. You don't necessarily have to have the language. That's a
right.
problem in our world. The language is an issue. Language access is an issue. What we want to do is liberate language so you can explain what you're going through in your words, and we can help to interpret that so that others will be able to understand it in their world. Doc, I've said enough, and just like Roishetta, I'm over here in Birmingham at that same event. I'm gonna have to get ready to go. I did want to appreciate my team. They put this whole thing together, y'all, and really just made it dope. Thank you, Aaliyah. Thank you, Marasia, Kyle, and the rest of the team for this awesome event. Thank you, Doc. And I'll tell Roishetta thank you again in just a moment when I see her.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and open up question and answer to the audience. If anyone has a question, you could come off of mute and we could discuss. But in the meanwhile, Dr. Ann, I did want to ask you how last week we did see that the FERC permitted a large gas exporting terminal regardless of Biden's pause earlier in the year. And then yesterday also a Trump appointed judge did overturn the pause. How do you feel about that? Do you have any opinion? Or I know it's from a scientist perspective, but we love your opinion.
Well, it's also because public health is a mix of science and policy. I think it's crazy that FERC, I just say FERC. I mean, if Biden has this policy for the administration, then FERC shouldn't be going against it. And that's a breakdown in how the administration is working because they should be closely coordinating. And what the judge did, I think, is not good. But it seems to me like a lot of the elected leaders from the other party, I'm trying to be careful. Anyway, seems like a lot of the elected leaders are kind of in bed with the fossil fuel industry and they don't care about the people that vote for them or their health. They just are promoting fossil fuels, saying, oh, we get jobs, oh, you know, this and that.
Right.
And they're not looking at what it's like. And it's like we're gonna all end up living in towns with no trees and black smoke killing us. And they're saying, oh, that's fine, we have jobs.
Right. Does anyone in the audience have a question? Yes.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you so much. First off, thanks for holding this meeting. It's been really informative. My name is Jose. I'm an environmental and climate policy analyst advocate here in the state of Maryland. And I work for an organization CASA. It's immigrant advocacy. A lot of our community members live in these super polluted areas. But I wanted to ask a specific question on LNG export terminals as well as LNG peak shaving plants in South Baltimore. There is South Baltimore area. There's a huge LNG export terminal. So I wanted to ask, what are some of the environmental impacts of just a strictly export terminals, and also how maybe more places where the natural gas is burned less often, like these the peak shaving plants, how do those impact the nearby communities? And I'll add this last thing. I asked this because part of my advocacy work is to talk with elected officials, and they're convinced that there is no harmful pollution associated with the export terminal and very minimal with the peak shaving plant, all within like 3 miles of each other, by the way.
Oh, um, yeah, I think keep just talking to elected people and get neighbors and family. If you can get a lot of people calling them, they'll start paying attention. If it's just one person, they'll say, oh, it's that same Jose again, saying the same thing. But if you get multiple people, if you can get one of the handheld monitors and say, yeah, this is what's in my front yard, this is what's in my living room, and I'm breathing it, that would be good. And there are plenty of studies that show that they actually do make pollution. They have to burn some of the methane to cool it and get it in the tank. And so as they burn that, that's lots of pollution, just the PM and NO2, and they turn into ozone, and that's affecting people that live right nearby. And then every time you're piping gas around, those pipes, there's always leaks. And there's lots of documentation that LNG export terminals have pollution problems. So if they think it's fine, they're just willfully choosing to ignore it. There's something that Catherine Hayhoe, who's a climate scientist, said that a week ago that really struck me. Is she's like, choosing not to do something, choosing to ignore a problem is just as much a choice as choosing to do something. And our they think they can get away with ignoring it, but it's an actual choice. They're making a choice to not do it and to not protect health. And so we need to just keep talking to them about what's going on and how it does affect health. If you want, Leah can give you my email. I guess that's best. You have everybody's. I don't mind people writing me and asking questions, and I can send you some list of studies that show that export terminals have plenty of pollution and they're not good for the neighbors.
Yes, at the end, I'll put our landing page for our campaign, and it has contact information for all of the panelists as well. So you could get that information from there.
I appreciate that, and thank you, doctor, for the response.
Thank you, Jose. I could go to you next, Sally, if you want to just hop in.
Yeah, question, and maybe it'll be on your landing page. Somebody mentioned a public comment period. So if there's a link to make comments, I would be glad to do
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Also, no, go ahead.
I'll look that up while you're asking questions.
Yeah, the other was a comment. I'm involved with working against radioactive waste and nuclear power, and Eric Epstein of the area around 3 Mile Island was very involved in monitoring right after that disaster. And yeah, it's really important, you get a bunch of citizen scientists together and collate stuff. He got grants. I can try. I don't know whether you have any information that would be helpful to you guys with volatile organics, but maybe, check.
Say that, can you say that again?
Well, I'm just thinking that he may have ideas about, how to get monitoring grants and stuff like that, because they went through it back in the 70s.
Yeah, because he's near Philadelphia and Baltimore, and there are some EPA grants right now for monitoring, but they may be already all awarded, because
Yeah.
I'm not sure EPA got a whole lot of money, and they've been trying to spend it as fast as they can in case the election goes bad. And there's no more, hopefully the election will go well and we'll continue to have money for more and more places to monitor, because we have community, we built highways and all these cars and trucks are polluting, and we have the ports and we have the gas facilities, and people don't monitor them that much. And if citizens, neighbors that live nearby can get grants to monitor, you can actually prove what's happening and say, look, this is way much better than what you think you've been telling us. You'd say it's no big deal, but it actually is.
And if you can do that in a coordinated manner so that you've got volume of statistics, that's, yeah.
We do have only like 3 more minutes, but I do want to end my question with Dr. Ann. What do you see for the future of environmental justice, and what gives you hope to just keep moving on, pressing forward?
I think we just need to keep talking and need to keep bringing it up and get people, we can get newspapers to talk about it. Elected leaders won't be able to overlook and say, ignore it. And I hope that some of these executive orders that Biden signed will actually become laws, so they're permanent and not just at the whim of a president who cares. Like what New Jersey passed the environmental justice law, and it requires permits to include cumulative effects. And we need that in every state, not just New Jersey.
Yeah, it took a long time to get that implemented, and industry keeps fighting it, but it was a good victory, and cumulative impacts are so critical. Really.
Right. I definitely agree with you guys' opinion. But to close us out, I do want to invite everyone to our second part of our Fall Solution webinar series that we're having. The next webinar will be on biomass. It's on July 17th, and we have a whole nother group of experts that will be sharing their experiences, telling you guys about the work they're doing. I will put that link in the hold on. I'll put that link in the comment section, and also we will be sending out more emails to everyone about our upcoming webinars. And I just want to thank you all for coming. I hope you guys learned something and you enjoyed. If you have any questions, you could email me. I also put my email in the chat as well. And this is my email.
And also, I just want to say some of the doctor groups I'm in, they're having a press conference next Tuesday about LNG and the health problems from that. So it's coming at it from multiple. We get citizen science and people that are affected to talk, and if we get the doctors to talk, say, look, this is screwing over people and it's affecting health and it's bad and it's a dumb solution. It's not a good bridge. We need to just move ahead and get clean energy.
Yes. So thank you all so much once again. I'm hoping to see you guys at our next webinar as well. You guys have a good rest of your day.
We need to stay on and talk, or we just leave.
You can, Marisha, can you stay?
Yes, I'll stay. Dr. Ann, you can go though. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Okay.
so much,
Yeah,
Dr.
sure.
Ann.
Yeah, sure. Anytime.
Marisha, how do I,
It should automatically, like, once you close this out, it'll show up on your
the
computer.
recording will be there too?
Mhm.
Okay, great. All right, have a good one. Well, not you, but